Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Sam Gilman. I work for Microsoft and I look after the server and cloud business in AP and EMEA on the Lenovo account. Thank you very much for your time today. We're going to be running through a few of the basic conversations and ideas about what hybrid cloud is, what Azure Stack HCI is, and how you can begin to start to weave these into the conversations that you're already having with your customers today. Obviously, if you're already relatively experienced with hybrid cloud, you may well know some of this already. However, there's always an opportunity to learn something new, and especially the sales approach. We won't be talking about technical elements today. This is more about the sales and the business benefits. Of course, the key call to action after this is for everybody to get together and learn more and understand about how it works specifically for your customers and your partner business. So with that, what I'm going to do is hand over to Kirti, who's the Microsoft HCI specialist in the region. And Kirti will give you a brief overview on Azure Stack HCI and hybrid cloud. Over to you, Kirti.
Thank you very much, Sam. I'm going to try and turn my webcam on. I will ask everyone to ignore the lighting. I am in a very closed room, but I think it's beneficial for everyone to see what I look like. And I will share my screen now. All right, you should see yourselves. Don't worry too much. I'm just going to start the slideshow now. And here we go. Is there anyone able to give me a screen check? Is everyone able to see the slide?
Yeah, all good. See that.
Okay. All right. Let's get started. So there's a few items on the agenda I'd like to touch on. I'll try. Don't be too overwhelmed. We're just going to touch on what Microsoft positioning on hybrid cloud is, what Azure Arc is. We will introduce a few concepts for everyone to take away and sort of listen for when you're having these conversations with your customers. We'll touch on very few use cases, very high level, and then we'll touch on very quick market opportunity around extended security updates. So Sam has given me 15 minutes. I'll try to stick to time. I've got a timer going. All right, so let's get started. Where is Microsoft going with hybrid cloud, and why do we even have a hybrid cloud offering? So over the past 3 to 5 years, as you know, Azure is one of our very core services, and it is very popular across Australia and across the globe. ANZ is one of the very fast adopters for Azure Cloud. But over the last few years, we've realized that not every customer wants to be in Azure. There have been customers that have gone, this is great, Microsoft, this is really good, we like Azure. However, I have my workload sitting in a school or in a hospital or at a retail shop or at a bank, and these workloads cannot exist in cloud. So how are you helping us with this? So over time, we did realize that there's this significant market gap on how we can address this in a very cohesive way. And so we've shifted some of our strategy to offer a hybrid cloud solution into the market. So what's essentially ended up happening is over the past 5 years, we've had customers become hybrid by accident. Now we want to make it hybrid by design and hybrid by intention. And that's the gap we're trying to cover with Azure Stack HCI. In terms of the challenges and opportunities driving this innovation, some of our key customer bases are across small and medium business customers as well as large enterprises. I will say my biggest wins over the past 2 years have been across the small medium business customer segment. And so in that segment, we've got healthcare system customers, we've got manufacturers, we've got finance, we've got retailers, and so on. And so each of these industries has a very specific challenge they're trying to address, and hybrid cloud fits very beautifully into that requirement. And so I'm going to introduce a new term here, and that is Azure Arc. And don't be overwhelmed if this is the first time you're hearing. If this isn't the first time you're hearing, then well done. You are really across the technologies that are going into the market today. So when you hear Azure Arc, and you will hear this a lot moving forward because we are going very strong with the Azure Arc motion. Azure Arc is essentially a glue, or it's basically the control plane that brings cloud onto your on-premise server. So we want you to think of Azure Arc as this overarching control plane, and that brings cloud together to your on-prem server. So Hyperconverged solution or Azure Stack HCI is basically just a bunch of servers that will sit at your customer's data center or their edge location or in a building. And what we're doing is we're saying, here's Azure Arc, and use this to bring your cloud to where your workloads are, which is your on-prem solution. And so I'll quickly touch on what the mission with Azure Stack HCI is, or what the mission with hybrid cloud is. So with Azure Stack HCI and Azure Arc, our mission is to deliver the best of Azure to our customers on their servers that they control with their preferred tools on their premises. So have a think about what that essentially means. It means it's no longer a workload running in Azure on servers that our customers don't know about. They have full control of that entire estate. They own the servers, they own the control, they own the tools that they will use to control these services or these servers, and we're just bringing Azure to them. So that's the mission with Azure Stack HCI and Azure Arc. And so what this basically means is we're able to bring a lot of these cloud conveniences to an on-prem solution and retaining that on-prem convenience as well. So when I say on-prem, I am referring to servers, 1 to 16, as many servers as they need, up to 16, sitting on in an actual building that they control on their premise. So Azure Arc is meant to be this overarching control plane that offers them control onto these on-prem servers and extends all of those cloud benefits onto their on-prem solution as well. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into this slide, but I think it's good for everyone to have a bit of a visual on what Azure Stack HCI is. At the very base itself, it's just an x86 server. So it's basically a server that you will procure from Lenovo, and you will run Azure Stack HCI as an operating system, just like Windows Server. The only difference is, unlike Windows Server, it doesn't boot into a graphical user interface, it boots into a kernel. And our customer runs something called virtual machines, which is basically a virtualized server on top of this actual server. So you can run as many virtual machines as you want, and that's basically just an on-prem solution that runs their virtual machines. Where Azure Stack HCI really comes into its own, or where we think our key differentiation is we bring all of these Azure services like AKS or Azure Kubernetes services. We bring Azure Data Services, we bring other hybrid services like backup and site recovery and Azure Monitor and so on. And these are just a few examples of the services that are available today. This list is constantly expanding. So that's just the long and short of what Azure Stack HCI really is. And it's, essentially a server where you run an operating system, you run your virtual machines, and you bring Azure services on-prem. Now, I will touch on this at a very high level as well. There's a few pillars we built this solution around, and essentially the core of the solution is that it is hybrid by design. So from the get-go, from the time it is clustered up and connected into Azure, it is meant to fire up those Azure services while retaining control of their data or capacity on-prem. So the customer retains control of the actual capacity itself while using Azure services. And because it is an essentially a server hyperconverged solution, they can scale the solution like a server as well. So they will just add more hard drives to increase the capacity. They will add more nodes if they want to increase the density. So it is very scalable. We also offer familiar management options. So if your customers are familiar with Windows Server, or if you're familiar with Windows Server, then you would know that Windows Admin Center is what runs the whole show with Windows Server. We use the same technology on Azure Stack HCI. So our customers are able to run Windows Admin Center, or you could use PowerShell if you're very technical and like that, you could do that. Or you just, monitor the whole thing from the Azure portal as well. So there's quite a few options depending on what yourself and your customers are very comfortable with. And then we offer a heap of deployment options as well. So our customers are able to get an empty box and then have yourselves, our partners, do the deployment, or they can get the entire solution fully deployed at factory with Stack HCI integrated, and then they just bring it in and they cluster it up and connect into Azure. So there's quite a few ways where we see our partners adding value when we, when we go to market with these solutions. So if you're a partner that's got skills in that server department, whether that's regular servers or hyperconverged platforms, this would be a good solution for you to start offering to your customers, especially if they've got a Windows Server base or if they've got an Azure consumer base. And so I'll touch on a few use cases as well, super high level. So where we see Azure Stack HCI really sort of gaining its foothold is in that enterprise modernization story. So when we say modernize and secure your data center infrastructure, the simplest way to look at it is a refresh. If you're offering service to your customers, then you'll know that they come in a 3-year or a 5-year or a 7-year life cycle. So typically at the end of these 3, 5, or 7 years, our customers hit a crossroad where they try to figure out if these workloads need to go into the cloud, or do we just keep them on-prem? So this is a solution that gives them the best of both the worlds. So they don't have to make that binary decision anymore. They can just go, you know what, I'm going to put this on a hybrid platform. I'm going to keep these virtual machines on-prem. I'm going to move those into the cloud. And then I'm going to use all of these Azure services because I'm very comfortable with it. So they can back up into Azure or DR into Azure or use these other services. So it's a really good use case for that data center or edge modernization story. Now, we started out as a data center centric solution, which means we were saying, you know what, why don't you run all of your primary applications on Azure Stack HCI? Very quickly, we realized that our USP is also in that edge use case. So we've got customers with several edge locations. It could be like a couple of schools or a couple of office buildings, or it could be a retail store. So we find that for these customers, just putting in 1 or 2 nodes of Azure Stack HCI across multiple locations has worked out really well. So now we know that even in that edge use case where we expect a huge amount of data to be produced in 2025, this is a very good fit. So to that point, we start with 1 single node and we go as high as 16 nodes. So we go from a single node hyperconverged platform to 60 nodes of an entire suite of data center solutions. So it's a really good use case for that. And then we do offer really good performance in SQL as well. And if you think about it, the core of that, the core reason for that is Server SQL, Windows SQL, as well as Azure Stack HCI, as well as Windows. These are all a Microsoft ecosystem. So our engineering teams have worked together to be able to run SQL in kernel to offer you the best performance. So if you're hearing SQL workloads or transactional workloads, think Azure Stack HCI because it is proven to offer the best performance. And then if you're hearing containers from our customers, and I know customers have been wanting to modernize into containers since a while ago, but this is a really good story for that because we can now run AKS on-prem, and that is identical to AKS in the cloud. So our customers can actually move these platforms, containers between cloud and on-prem. So that is a great story for customers that have that modernization plan for application, but they're not there just yet. And then AVD is another technology. It is another Azure service that is coming into Azure Stack HCI. It will run identical to the other Azure services, where you pay for the service as an Azure service, but they use their capacity, the underlying capacity, as their own hard drives or as their own servers. And so I've got about 3 to 4 minutes left, and I'll quickly touch on the ESU opportunity as well. And I know Sam will cover a bit of this in his section later as well. So ESUs is short for Extended Security Updates. And this is the price that our customers pay to Microsoft to maintain security on legacy Windows versions, so 2008 and 2012. For context, first year, they pay us about 75% of their full license price for legacy SQL and Windows Server. Second year, they pay a 400%, and the third year, they pay 125%. If you think about it, that is a lot of money our customers are investing to maintain all the licenses. The cherry on top here is ESUs with Azure Stack HCI are absolutely free of cost. So if you're hearing your customers say, oh, I can't refresh now because I've got, these older applications that need to exist on Server 2012, no problem. Get brand new infrastructure with the cutting edge technology that is Azure Stack HCI, and you get ESUs free of cost. In fact, some of our biggest wins in Australia have been based on ESUs because our customers have realized that they are essentially black holing that money. And so they're able to get just better, faster infrastructure while getting free licenses for their older Windows Server models. Outside of Azure, actual proper Azure, Azure Stack HCI is the only place where we offer ESUs. And so all of this is public-facing information. So I'm happy to link you into the actual document as well if anyone's keen to hear. And so with that, I'm going to close today. There's quite a few learning paths. If anyone's got access to Expert Zone, we just released 2023 accreditation as well. It is also high level. It gives you a good overview of the technology, and it gives you a patch as well, which you're free to share with LinkedIn or promote within your organizations as well. Outside of that, there's Stack HCI Foundation Learning Path, as well as a heap of resources that is public facing and available. And so with that, I will stop talking, and I'm happy to take any questions after, and I will hand over to the next speaker.
Thanks, sorry for the pause there, and hopefully we should be seeing my slides all being well.
Coming through, Sam, looks good.
Thank you very much. Right, there we go, and I'll just for the sake put my ugly face on the screen as well.
It's always good for people to see you speaking, so great.
So as we talked about at the start, and I mentioned, this is not a technical session, and thank you, Kirti, giving us a great overview just at the top level there. I think that was the important piece, so we can understand the basics of Azure Stack HCI. And it's really important for everybody here, whether you've got knowledge, a certain level of knowledge, or you're starting out with this conversation, we can absolutely, to Kirti's last few comments, there are a whole variety of learning paths, different sorts of documents, elements of sharing. We can do training and enablement. So wherever you are in that particular learning path yourself, we can absolutely help you. So wanted to touch on using Windows Server End of Support to start having these conversations around HCI and Azure. And for some of you, depending on where you are in the country, you may well have been to one of Leaders Expo events, either in Perth or Sydney, Melbourne, last week Adelaide, and Brisbane this week. You'll have seen me doing a couple of slides around this, a very short version, and hopefully if you were there, you also came and talked to us on the stand. If you're in the Brisbane area and you're thinking about coming, definitely please do, because that would be a great way to have further conversations on from this particular point. So yeah, wanted to talk about the size of the opportunity, where are the opportunities around customer options to modernize and upgrade, how can we help you as partners to learn more about these opportunities. And again, lastly, we'll talk about the simple, profitable, repeatable solutions that are there already and some new ones that are coming on board. I'm going to start talking about where is the opportunity, what are the customer options, so you can be able to talk to them about modernization and upgrade. And then partners and customers, how can you learn more about this? And as I mentioned, that last key point around simple and profitable, repeatable solutions. Just wanted to go back over very briefly two short pieces. As Kirti said, a number of years ago, Microsoft were very much focused on Azure, and we realized that we had a jewel in the crown, we had an on-premise capability. And as more and more people talked about hybrid cloud, and you can see this quote from our CEO, Satya, who was talking about the evolution of hybrid cloud. We've all talked about public cloud, private cloud, multi-clouds. There are lots of these different things, but ultimately, there are an awful lot of customers out there who want to be able to understand and feel comfortable that they've got on-premise capabilities with their hardware, but then as and when they want to, they can then start to link into whether it's Azure or any of the other clouds that are out there. So this is all about that flexibility that can be offered. And again, briefly in a single slide, what Azure Stack HCI is about: subscription-based model as opposed to Windows Server, which is a perpetual one-off license. I've got a slide down at the bottom of this deck. You'll get a copy of the presentation, and that will give you a bit more detail as to what these different things are and give an explanation. So if you haven't heard about Azure Stack HCI or extended security updates, then there's a couple of short lines on there will give you a much clearer idea. So I talked about on that slide, where's the opportunity and what's the size of the opportunity. For those of you I mentioned that may or may not have been to one of Leaders Expo events already, there are more than 500,000 old servers in Australia. And again, surveys vary depending on the amount that you're talking about, but typically these are 6, 7, 8, or even 9 years old or older. And I'm sure you've got plenty of customers who've got servers that are older than that. There's that huge opportunity to talk about upgrading with them. And ever since 13 days ago, October the 10th, Windows Server 2012 and 12R2 went end of support. So it now means that there are literally hundreds of thousands of older versions, old copies of Windows Server, both 2008 and 2012. What this means is that there is that opportunity to have a conversation around those servers and infrastructure and how best you can help your customers and give them those different options. And as Katie was mentioning, there's this thing called Azure Stack HCI in Australia. The size of the hardware market only is around about $500 million there. It's absolutely huge. So the opportunities there to grow and develop the business as you have these conversations are very significant. Now, what does this mean in terms of real life, real conversations? You can work from left to right or right to left on these. And I've spent many years working with resellers, end user customers, as well as working in distribution, where typically we would start on the right-hand side, where I've drawn the rather handwritten yellow box there, where you would normally have conversations just around upgrading servers, upgrading the Windows Server software, possibly the SQL Server if that was there as well. Now, if those deadlines couldn't be met to move those workloads over, you're able to buy, or the end user is able to buy extended security updates to get more time to be able to move those workloads over. But that's all about purchase, and you'll see this suddenly becomes a very costly exercise on one of the next slides. If you look on the far left-hand side, the traditional way that Microsoft would look to focus was absolutely moving those workloads, those applications straight over to Azure. And the benefit there is you can run securely those extended security updates through Azure virtual machines. And there's a saving significantly with Azure hybrid benefit as well. Now, if you go through the middle path, because we're seeing more and more people who want to keep their servers on premise, and they have that challenge there where they still want some level of flexibility, they can move them on to Azure Stack HCI. And again, you can see free extended security updates. It's really significant that you're able to understand as you move forwards, if you're not already aware of this, the differences between the three options, how they overlap each other, and the benefits and the pros and cons. But for the vast majority of SMB mid-market customers, you'll see people who do want to keep things on premise, then certainly either the right-hand box or most definitely the central box is the key one to look for. Excuse me, sorry. So I mentioned about looking at a slide which talks about the cost there. It's absolutely significant that if those people are buying extended security updates already, and there are many of your customers, you may or may not know it, are already purchasing these updates. Katie mentioned 2008 as well as 2012 going end of support recently. There's a fairly significant cost there. So you've got to be very, very careful when you're talking to the customers to ensure that you understand where the benefits are. Now, of course, they can stay on that for up to 3 years. They can then look to migrate their workloads over time. But in actual fact, and forgive me, as you can see, this is in euros rather than US or Australian dollars, but we'll look to get updated slides for these as well. And we'll put examples out there for everybody. So you can see when you modernize with Lenovo's Think Agile MX architecture, Azure Stack HCI and their versions, you've got less nodes immediately, only 3 nodes. And the way in which you can add in Azure Stack HCI as an OS with all the updates and the licenses, and it will cost virtually the same, slightly less. I'm not able to put exact figures here, of course, because these vary all of the time, and it depends on who you are quoting and the types of bid prices and everything else. But the basic concept here is if you've got existing customers that are spending money on extended support updates, it's more logical for them to look and upgrade and modernize because it will cost them the same or less. And of course, in terms of power and cooling, with less nodes, it's going to mean a saving there as well. I talked about at the start how can we get this message out to the customers? And the short answer is we're doing this already. We, being both Microsoft and Lenovo jointly as part of the alliances team, and also Leader. Leader have been using some of this campaign literature around Windows Server end of support and also Think Agile MX. You can see from the slide deck here we've got an ebook that can be easily downloaded that's open for customers if they want to understand more about this, and also flyers and various emails. And then moving on to the other slide, you've got a similar thing but more channel based for you as partners, so you can understand where the benefits are. And I talked about using Windows Server end of support as that driving part of the conversation. And these are some of the campaign assets that are out there now. Some that have been used by Lenovo, some by Leader themselves. You can see in the bottom left-hand corner, these are in multiple languages and growing significantly as well. So there is more going on around the world as we develop this. And back to my rather scruffily yellow box in the left-hand side, you can see that aligns to that slide I showed you earlier on, the 3 areas of the business. Simple upgrade with hardware and new licenses, a foundation for hybrid cloud around MX, or extending the support with ESU by using Azure services. So there is a whole bunch of literature and support collateral and marketing which both Leader, Lenovo and Microsoft are using to be able to drive and support this message out to customers, and to help you guys as partners to be able to support and understand the messaging more clearly. If I wanted to say one particular message and one particular slide, it would be this particular one. There is a website, and again, as I mentioned, you'll get the presentation, so no need to write it down separately. A website called lenovoSalesPortal.com. This is a joint site which Lenovo and Microsoft have been running for a number of years around server and software. And there is a huge amount of information, including some of the pieces I've showed you already. There are lots of different videos from different people around Azure Stack HCI and hybrid. There is also collateral there that both you can use and customers. And the interesting thing here is that 95% of this site is open for customers as well. There are a few places within the site you need to register because as a reseller, the specific literature for you. However, if your customers want to know and understand more about Lenovo and Microsoft working together, this is a great place to send them, and you can see the same things that you're looking at to learn more about the business, they can see as well. So the key bit, again, is around how can we make this easy for you? Because we all know IT solutions, when they come along, are typically like the swan gliding across the surface, the feet are going like crazy under the water. There is always a huge amount of activity going on that makes these things simple if we can do it very easily and clearly. And what Leader can help you to do now, and this is today and has been for a short while, to be able to easily scope and configure this solution using certified Lenovo solutions. I say certified because, like all of the OEM manufacturers, Lenovo have to work with Microsoft to ensure that the configurations they put together work correctly. So you cannot just put a pile of servers and memory and storage together. It may or may not work. However, you do not get the Microsoft and Lenovo support that goes with it. So it's important to use certified solutions. Leader have got tools that they can use to easily scope and configure, and then depending on the services that you're already offering today, they can help with full install, deploy, total monitoring and management options. And I think this suddenly becomes very interesting, because what we want to be able to do as a joint Lenovo and Microsoft team working with Leader, A, is to help you increase your revenue and profit, as it says on this slide, but it's also to be able to speed up that sales cycle. I think that's the important thing. Yes, of course, large complex deals sometimes takes many months to work on. However, if we can help to shorten that sales cycle in terms of the scoping and configuring and installation and deployment, you then become more confident, your customers become more confident with you, and it gives you a much more stronger hold on that conversation that you can have around modernization via migration. Now, I mentioned a couple of points there with the asterisks down at the bottom. I occasionally add in a couple of Lenovo slides. We haven't got a direct Lenovo speaker today, but it's important to remember that Lenovo servers are more reliable than the other ones out there in the market. This is ITIC is a totally independent survey and has been running for many, many years. And also, Lenovo servers work incredibly well with Azure Stack HCI because of the way the configurations are. And you'll also see world-leading figures on SQL performance with them as well. So if maybe you are looking at other manufacturers or you're working with other manufacturers' servers today, it's definitely worth spending a bit more time looking at Lenovo because incredible opportunities. And frankly, customers want the best value for money, and they want to ensure that the products that they're buying through you via the manufacturers are absolutely as rock solid and as reliable as possible. So why would you not at least look and possibly offer them the most reliable servers in the market? And then the second point there, again, I'm sure most of you are already authorized Lenovo partners through Leader. If you're not, I would urge you to sign up. There's a huge amount of different benefits there, and they can absolutely increase the margin and the profit that you're making as a company. So, brief call to action here is just let's make sure you follow up and you come and talk to us. I think that's really, really key. There are a huge amount of things that we can add into the discussions after today, but I think it's really important to at least get the basics that there's an opportunity here. Windows Server 2008, 2012 now going end of support. There's that opportunity to have the conversations with your customers and talk about migration and possible migration onto hybrid cloud and Azure Stack HCI. Now, I realize, of course, every single country is tough at the moment. It has been, and it was before COVID, but it's doubly tough since. So we need to be able to help and work with you and make the messaging as strong and as pertinent as possible. And that's why I showed you some of the marketing material that's here, because that can absolutely help and focus on these areas. So that's it for this piece. What we're now just going to do briefly is myself, I'll stay on the mic, but I've got Philip Moss next to me here. As I mentioned, we had a brief change and move things around. Philip works for a systems integrator and a reseller called Accutech, who have got offices worldwide, but most of what they do, yes, they help people like Lenovo and Leader, complex Microsoft solutions, but they're also a reseller themselves. And I think it's a good chance to take just a couple of minutes to have a chat with Phil and understand how he sees Azure Stack HCI and how the market's changed. So I guess that's my first question to Phil is, he's been doing this for Microsoft solutions for 20, 25 years. Certainly over the last 5 or 10 years, how have you seen things change, and how has hybrid cloud and Azure Stack HCI come to the fore in terms of the market?
So good afternoon all, and hopefully you can hear me clearly as Sam and I share a laptop this afternoon. So let's think about that really key question. You know, how has the world of infrastructure solutions changed in the last, let's say, 5 to 8 years? In the time that we've been thinking about hyperconverged, and you know, Accutech has been building solutions with customers. If I go back, say, 5 to 7 years, it was really about a infrastructure modernization versus VMware or Nutanix. In other words, it was a conversation about Microsoft infrastructure solutions versus solutions from other vendors. And there were lots of conversations about capacity or performance or reliability or cost. And the battleground was really on those fronts. And then as time has gone forwards, there is still a conversation about, oh yes, we're spending lots of money on, say, Nutanix or VMware. But actually the conversation for Azure Stack HCI is really as Kirti was describing it. It is an Azure endpoint. It is an endpoint to consume Azure services in a location that is geographically close to your user base. And that's really important, because now, you know, my colleagues in sales and business development are not really talking about hyperconverged infrastructure. They're not really talking about VMware or Nutanix. They are talking in terms of, you know, are you a customer who's running legacy Windows workloads and wants to migrate forward to a modern infrastructure platform? Or are you a customer who is using Azure as your primary management plane today to drive services, and therefore you want an on-prem version of Azure? And that's really where we now see most of the conversations about Azure Stack HCI. So hopefully, Sam, that answers your question.
No, thank you. And I think the other key bit, just going on to, I'll move back to the slide I showed before, the one before. How are you finding using the Lenovo services that are on offer around scoping and configuration? Is that making life that much easier now?
So the interesting challenge of Azure Stack HCI, and this is something a lot of people do not understand, is it is a complicated, clustered, software-defined infrastructure solution. Now, there were a bunch of words I used there. Critically, and this is where it's simplified, getting any of those parts wrong does not result in working solutions. One of the advantages of working with Lenovo is that Lenovo has a number of turnkey solutions to make it very easy to scope and design systems without mistakes, and then plan and implement solutions at scale without mistakes. And the reason that's important is because ultimately solutions that are poorly designed or critically poorly implemented tend to be unstable, tend to be unreliable, and therefore that drives up the total cost of ownership for the customer, and more importantly, it drives down the profit margins for us as resellers and partners. So ultimately, that reliable, predictable scoping, planning, and support from Lenovo is incredibly valuable when compared to other vendors.
No, thank you. And are you seeing an upturn with the customers that you work with and the reseller partners that you also help around using this conversation, especially with end of migration, end of support from Windows Server, to then start opening the conversation just away from a server and a license?
So what we're really getting at here, I think, is what triggers a commercial conversation, right? And I'm going to expand your statement slightly, because it's really driven by what does a customer need. And there's some common threads we often see. The first is, oh, I've got some old application or old service that I cannot migrate forward, and I need to have support security updates. And that's the end of life support statement, the ESU. So that drives a conversation. Customers can't modernize apps, can't modernize services, but they can maintain support on the managed Stack HCI. The next drive for conversations with our customers and our partners is, yes, I've been running in Azure for insert period of time. You know, my users or my colleagues need to have services that are, you know, geographically close to them, on-prem, at the edge, and that drives a conversation about Azure Stack HCI. And then the last two, and I'll cover these very briefly, is customers who have, say, invested in an early generation of either a SAN or a SAN with a virtualization platform, either Hyper-V or VMware, and those are either coming end of life in terms of hardware or are going end of life in terms of software renewal. And that drives a migration conversation because the operating cost of these legacy platforms is becoming too high. And then the last sister of that is people who invest in, say, hyperconverged infrastructure, either on VMware or Nutanix. And again, the licensing pathways become too expensive, and that drives the conversation forwards. And I think that's the way we're really seeing a lot of these conversations going. It's those pillars make people go, yes, I need something new.
Perfect, thank you. So I think, and again, I know have run out of time. My apologies for my delay in the middle of all of this, but I think the key takeaways here are follow up on the conversations that you're having with Leader, especially if you're working directly with Lenovo. By all means, talk with account managers there, but speak directly to Leader, and they can help you through these pieces. And we'll look to work with you as a team, Leader, Lenovo, and Microsoft, to look at your customers, where they are today, and to be able to have those conversations that Phil just talked about. I'm sure you all are having those conversations in one form or another. It's making sure that we can maximize the benefit and show that the actual way and the sales cycle we can shorten using the simple tools that are there already, using the marketing and the go-to-market collateral to make sure the customers are aware of what's going on. So we can make best efforts and we can drive and grow the business collectively. I go back to that slide I showed earlier on. There are literally hundreds of thousands of servers that are out there at the moment that are old and getting older. And of course, they're out of security updates and they're not being secured in any way, shape or form. Of course, they're working perfectly okay until the time something goes wrong. And then, of course, the real issue occurs. So I think we'll finish there. My apologies that it wasn't quite as smooth as it should have been. The key thing is go back to your leader teams, go back to Prez, Simon and your account managers. We'll share the solutions and the presentation pieces, and then we'll move from there. Thank you so much.